Today, we're diving into one of the most infamous chapters in music history. It was the dawn of the 90s, and the pop charts were on fire with catchy beats. But behind the glamour and fame, a scandal of epic proportions was unraveling. Hi there, I'm Chris. You probably already know the punchline, but I hope you'll join us to get the rest of the story behind the meteoric rise and fall of pop sensation Mili Vanilli. Let's recap. How easy is it to make a deal with the devil? If someone offered to make all your dreams come true, if you agreed to tell a lie, would you be able to turn them down? For Fabrice Morvan and Robert Pilatus, the disgraced frontmen of Mili Vanilli, the deal was too good to ignore, and all they had to do was sign on the bottom line. Rob and Fab were just two unknown kids in Germany with model good looks and dance moves.
Here are two former world-class breakdancers nominated for Grammys who have become huge international stars with record sales in the millions. Well, girl, you know it's true. It can only mean Mili Vanilli.
They suddenly became the most famous people in the world. Millions of teenagers bought their records, young kids idolized them, and the music industry awarded them for their talent.
And the best new artist is Mili Vanilli.
But their star crashed and burned as fast as it rose. See, they had a secret. What nobody knew was that Fab and Rob never sang a single note in any of their songs. At shows, they'd dance and twirl and lip sync to pre-recorded tracks. And while lip syncing isn't a crime, it was a major scandal in the late 80s, early 90s. They were booed off the world stage, stripped of their Grammy, and blacklisted from music. But were Rob and Fab simply the scapegoats for a much larger scandal? In the new Paramount Plus documentary, Mili Vanilli, director Luke Coram explores what really happened between 1989 and 1990. Who was really pulling the strings? Where did all the money go? And how complicit were Rob and Fab in the scam? Did someone else's greed ultimately cost one of them their lives? Mili Vanilli's story began in 1964 when Rob Pilatus was born in New York City. His father was an African-American serviceman. His mother was a German dancer. His parents couldn't take care of Rob, so they put him up for adoption. He spent 5 years in an orphanage until he was placed in the care of a white German family in Munich, Germany. Meanwhile, Fabrice Morvan was born in 1966 on the Caribbean island of Guadeloupe. His parents moved to Miami for a few years, but lived in Paris for most of Fab's childhood. At 18, he moved to Munich, chasing a career as a singer, dancer, and model. In a 1989 interview with the LA Times, Rob talked about the struggles of growing up black in Germany. There just aren't many black people in Germany, he said. Without anything to identify with, you grow up thinking maybe you're not as good as everybody else. Black American pop stars like Michael Jackson pushed Rob to chase his dream. Just as British rock invaded America in the 1960s and 70s, American pop, rap, and R&B invaded Europe in the 80s and 90s. Rob got really good at breakdancing, so good that he was invited to an international competition in New York in 1984. That's where fate stepped in. Rob took a side trip to Los Angeles, and according to the LA Times, Fab was in town for a dance seminar. The two met at a disco. They bonded over their shared experience of growing up black in a mostly white German society. Back in Munich, they crossed paths again. This time, they decided to work together. They started out as background singers and dancers, but dreamed of making it big. The gears of fame, however, moved slowly. In 1987, they recorded an album for a small German label. It only sold a few thousand copies. It's not that Rob and Fab were bad singers. They were simply competing in a market stuffed with aspiring pop stars. They needed an in. Unfortunately, that in was a deal with the devil. Meet Frank Farian, a German producer and the puppet master behind the Mili Vanilli scandal. In 1941, Frank Farian was born into a working-class family on the German-French border. He grew up near a U.S. military base. Frank never liked the Beatles or the Rolling Stones. He was a soul man at heart. He loved American disco, funk, and R&B, and made a few bucks covering songs at local bars for homesick soldiers. His band never hit it big, though. A white German singing American funk wasn't an easy sell. Then Frank got a bright idea. In the 1970s, he pivoted away from performing and focused on producing. He created a group called Boney M. Their album covers always depicted 4 black singers. But Boney M was mostly Frank Farian. Even though other people were credited, he sang sang and performed on the albums. It was like an early trial and error run for the Mili Vanilli fiasco. Frank skyrocketed to the top. Boney M sold millions of records, and he turned into a successful producer, working with singers like Meatloaf and Stevie Wonder. But back then, you didn't make it until you were big in the United States. To do that, Frank needed something the kids loved. He needed rap music. He brought on two Americans who were well-versed in the hip-hop sound. They tweaked some old Boney M mixes and layered new verses on top. But Frank's Americans didn't have the look he needed. They weren't thrilled with the idea of going on tour either. That's when Frank found Rob and Fab, two unknown dancers with the look he was going for. They went by the name Mili Vanilli, which they said means positive energy in Turkish. Before Frank came along, Rob and Fab were struggling to stay afloat. They lived in housing projects in Munich and didn't have a Deutschmark between them. They wanted to be stars more than anything else. Then, on New Year's Day 1988, Frank invited Rob and Fab to his studio in Munich to listen to a new demo. It was a song called Girl, You Know It's True. The duo assumed they'd be singing backing vocals, so when Frank told them they were going to be the stars out in front, they jumped at the opportunity. Frank promised he'd make them millionaires. All they had to do was sign. We should all take the Mili Vanilli story as a critical life lesson. Always read the contract. The contract obligated Frank to record 10 songs with Mili Vanilli each year, but it didn't specify who would actually be singing the songs. With their dreams just a signature away, Rob and Fab signed it without reading it. When they showed up at the studio, they found out their voices would not be used on the debut single, Girl, You Know It's True. Instead, the song was recorded by studio musicians. American singer Brad Howell did all the singing, rapper Charles Shaw did all the hip-hop verses. It wasn't what they were expecting, but Rob and Fab figured it was a one-time deal. They'd just lip-sync this one song and be able to record their own music later. Instead, it turned into a good news, bad news scenario. Girl was a global success, but that meant Rob and Fab had to keep lip-syncing on promotional tours across Europe. The music video debuted on January 18th, 1989. Well, it might not hold up today, but that video was a smash back then. The song climbed to the top of the American charts. Frank had finally broken through. The next step was an album, but since the first lip-sync song was such a success, Frank wasn't about to turn back now. So he kept Brad Howell and switched Charles Shaw for John Davis. The duo, known as Mili Vanilli, never sang a single note. But the lip-sync rumors were already spreading, and keep in mind, this wasn't just lip-syncing like lip-syncing to your own voice that you originally recorded the song with. This was lip-syncing someone else's voice altogether. Pressure was mounting, so Frank moved Fab and Rob to London while he ran damage control in Munich. According to Charles Shaw, Frank threatened him to stop talking about the lip-syncing. Frank claims he paid him a $150,000 settlement. But despite their producer's best efforts, Rob and Fab couldn't escape the rumors, even in the UK. During a radio interview in London, the host demanded they sing live on air to prove it was them on the record. It was actually kind of a miracle they got away with it at all. Fab only knew limited English. Rob had a thick German accent that mysteriously never came through on the songs. Nobody seemed to wonder how these two guys sounded so authentically American. But when the money is flowing in, you don't ask questions. Mili Vanilli signed with an American label, Arista Records, and its founder, Clive Davis. Even today, at 90 years old, Clive Davis is a titan in the American music industry. He's the kind of guy who knows everybody who's anybody. But did Arista Records know about the lip-syncing? Arista and Clive Davis say they didn't know a thing about it. It's true that Frank made sure to keep things compartmentalized in his studio. Rob and Fab never met the real singers behind Mili Vanilli. The real singers never met Rob or Fab. But we're not quite at the big reveal just yet. Mili Vanilli's newfound fame came with 4 hit singles in America: Girl, You Know It's True, Blame It on the Rain, Baby Don't Forget My Number, and Girl, I'm Gonna Miss You. They began performing all over the US, but it was a concert in Bristol, Connecticut on July 21st, 1989 that tipped the first scandalous domino. Check this out. Did you catch that glitch with the tape? Talk about a disaster. Rob ran off stage. He knew right then and there that it was the beginning of the end for Mili Vanilli. It took some arguing to get him back on stage, and they eventually finished the set. The thing was, the glitch didn't stop the record from selling millions of copies. Worldwide, it allegedly grossed over $50 million. When Rob and Fab as Mili Vanilli took home the Best New Artist Award at the 32nd Grammys in February 1990, they were on top of the world. Rolling Stone was the only magazine that didn't buy in, dubbing them the worst act of 1989. By the summer of 1990, lip-syncing allegations were getting hotter and hotter. People began questioning how stars like Madonna, Janet Jackson, and Mili Vanilli could perform these high-energy dance routines without ever missing a note. Some politicians even got involved by trying to pass a bill that would require performers to fess up if they were lip-syncing on stage. It was a simpler time when all politicians had to worry about was live concerts. Crazy, right? Several performers were taking heat, and most of them claimed they were singing live. But during an interview in LA, Rob said, "Of course we work with tapes on a certain level, but we sing live too. This means that on some songs, because of the high energy, we use the tape, but on other songs, we sing live." Rob and Fab didn't want to live a lie any longer. They wanted to sing on the next record, like actually sing. Frank said hell no. Rob and Fab pushed back and threatened to expose the lip-syncing secret. Frank simply beat them to the punch. He outed them himself in November 1990. The Washington Post broke the scandal in an article titled "Pop Duo Mili Vanilli Didn't Sing Hit Album." Frank said he fired Fab and Rob after they insisted on singing on the second record. He got ahead of the story, saying they were telling terrible lies about him. "I made them rich." The record companies were very satisfied. The real singers also got rich, and Frank Farian got even richer. Only Rob Pilatus wanted much more, Frank told the LA Times. But according to the new 2023 documentary, that's not necessarily true, at least the part about everyone else getting rich. According to director Luke Coram, Frank Farian took home the lion's share of the profits. Fab and Rob got paid comparatively small rates for performing and doing appearances. The only person to make any residuals was Brad Howell, since he was part of a union. Meanwhile, the studio musicians were allegedly only paid for their time. Arista Records made good money. Mili Vanilli was right up there with Arista's top earners like Whitney Houston. A few weeks after the scandal came to light, the duo was stripped of their Best New Artist Award. To this day, it's the only Grammy that's ever been revoked. During a press conference with over 100 journalists, Rob and Fab said they made a deal with the devil when they signed that contract with Frank. But the guys were still naive. Rob and Fab thought the music industry would welcome them back with open arms. Little did they know they'd already been blacklisted, and every comedian and talk show host in the world was making fun of them. Fox's In Living Color joked about Mili Vanilli at-home starter kits, complete with their signature long braids and easy-to-follow dance steps. The LA Times mentioned "honk if you sang on Mili Vanilli's record" bumper stickers. David Letterman did a top 10 list of new jobs for the duo. Number 1 was "who cares as long as we never have to hear from them again." It was a joke, but that's pretty much what happened. Frank moved on with a new project called The Real Mili Vanilli and an album called The Moment of Truth. It didn't exactly set the music world on fire. But Frank just downplayed the whole ordeal. During a post-scandal interview with the LA Times, he said, "What was the betrayal? Did anyone in America believe that the Village People or the Monkees really sang themselves? Everyone's been doing it for 25 years. To his credit, Frank did admit that lying wasn't the best choice. If he could do it again, he'd just have Fab and Rob dance while the band performed the music. Pretty much like every boy band out there. But then again, hindsight is 2020. Mili Vanilli tried to revitalize their career in other ways. They got into acting in 1991, but only starred in a commercial that parodied their lip-syncing scandal. On November 30th, 1991, Rob attempted suicide at a hotel on the Sunset Strip. Thankfully, the police were able to talk him off his balcony, but he never really recovered from the bullying and the shame, and he battled with drugs and alcohol abuse. The duo began work on a new project called Rob and Fab. They released an album in 1993, but it only sold 2,000 copies. The single, We Can Get It On, wasn't too different from their Mili Vanilli music, but nobody could separate their faces from the scandal. The two guys drifted apart. Rob was in and out of rehab and spent spent some time in jail. In a 1997 interview with People magazine, Fab said they had no relationship at this point. On April 2nd, 1998, Rob Pilatus died of an accidental overdose. According to Frank, Rob died on the eve of a Mili Vanilli reunion. He was finally going to let them sing on a record. Fab refutes these claims in his memoir. He wrote, "I sold myself to the devil, and the devil is coming back again. For all the money in the world, I would never subject myself to that life." Today, Fab lives with his partner and 4 children in Amsterdam. He still sings and makes music and is happy to be a father. He and Rob never thought of themselves as the victims in this story. They perpetuated the lie just as much as everyone else. But maybe scapegoats is a better word. Did public backlash and bullying push Rob to kill himself? Fab certainly thinks so. Were they a cog in a greedy music machine with a dark underbelly? Absolutely. One thing's for sure, never sign something without reading it. The devil is always in the details.
And that's your recap.
Thanks for hanging out with us today.
If you like getting all the crime in half the time, go ahead and tap that subscribe button and the bell so you never miss a story.
We're here Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, but don't go away. Catch up on more recaps right here, right now.
Until next time, take care.